kill our prophets while we stand aside and look. Ooh, some say it's just a part of it. We've got to fulfill the book. Won't you help to sing these songs of freedom? 'Cause all I ever had, redemption songs, redemption songs, redemption songs. Emancipate yourselves from mental slavery. None but ourselves can free our mind. Oh, have no fear for atomic energy, 'cause none of them can stop at the time. How long shall they kill our prophets while we stand aside and look? Yes, some say it's just a part of it. We've got to fulfill the book. Won't you help to sing these songs of freedom? 'Cause all I ever had, redemption songs. All I ever had, redemption songs. These songs of freedom, songs of freedom.
Welcome, 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 welcome all. I hope that you can hear me within the sound of my voice. Today is August the 31st, and would you know it? It is 6:06 p.m. on the most beautiful day. I hope that you all have had an incredible day on this day we call the International Day for people of African descent. And so we greet you. We are coming to you in the comfort of your home. And so you have invited us into your hearts, and we don't take that lightly. We appreciate all of you. And tonight is a night of celebration. It's a night of reconnecting. It's a night of reaching out to each other. And it's a night of offering up incredible information. I've had a great day, but today also reminds me of the great poet Langston Hughes. And he writes, oh my God, so poetically, the night is beautiful, so the faces of my people. The stars are beautiful, so the eyes of my people. Beautiful also is the sun. Beautiful also are the souls of my people. I just got to say that again. Beautiful also are the souls of my people. And today, two young people of African descent showed me kindness. One person didn't cut me off in traffic. They allowed me in. Woo, hoo, hoo, woo, woo. And the other person came to the People's Residence, the Blackers Cultural Center at 777 Bathurst Street to say to us, how can we get involved and collaborate? So every day we love upon each other. We network with each other. We connect with each other. We do all sorts of incredible things that are documented, things that are spoken into the universe, things that are whispered, things that are said quietly. We do all these things as people of African descent. My name is Itah Sadu, and I am privileged to be the host for this evening as we enter a great conversation. speaking and recognizing this International Day for people of African descent. And tonight we have all kinds of A's in the house. A representing not only the first letter of the alphabet, but that A that you see on your report card that says, awesome, top of your game, top of the line. And so tonight we have folks like Anan Lololi, or Anan, all his incredible work in the journey of the food sector. Coming also to act you is Amanuel Melles, and Emmanuel also too, another person with the letter A, and he is the executive director of the Network for the Advancement of Black Communities. And we come in with another A. Oh my gosh, Anthony Morgan, representing Confronting Anti-Black Racism with the city of Toronto. And then we're coming with a Q, and that is the master drummer, Quammie Williams. Whoever said Q is for the queen? Now, if we had to rewrite our history books, we would say Q is for Quammie Williams and the excellence that he brings in all the multidisciplinary areas of his life. So stay locked into this. We came on with the voice and the music of the Honorable Robert Nesta Marley. And again, props to the curator and for all of you who on a good day, the average is 200 people walking into number 1 Yonge Street to take in the incredible curating and exhibition that presents the life of the Honorable Robert Nesta Marley. Oh my God, so much stuff going on. And this is also August, again, the month that we celebrate and salute the birth of the Honorable Marcus Mosiah Garvey. And one last thing, a big shout out to all the nationals of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago for the celebration of 60 years of independence. And having said that, I could just hear the troops revving up. I also given a big shout out to all the Jamaicans, wherever they are in this country, because they too are celebrating 60 years of independence. Woo, the month is massive. But one of the things to think about all this evening is the power of the Honorable Marcus Mosiah Garvey. He didn't have social media. He didn't have Instagram. He didn't even tweet. But how is it that this incredible man was an incredible advocate on behalf of the peoples of African descent and was able to influence millions all around the world? So enough respect to this national hero coming out of the great nation of Trinidad and Tobago. And now I'm going to introduce the hardest working person in the food sector, the man who brought you the African food basket, that person who always talks about your health, a person who has been a vegan for 44 plus years. I also know him in his life as a musician. And you're not, you were a musician. You always are a musician. So we know he still plays music, and that is still something in his heart. And Anan is also to Lola, is also to the DNA and the heartbeat behind the Food Sovereignty Network Toronto. And this evening is brought to you by the Food Sovereignty Network, Black Food Sovereignty Toronto. Black Food Sovereignty Toronto. That's who's bringing this evening to you with their collaborators. Anan has a master's degree from York University and a diploma in business administration from Centennial College. So let's put our hands together and bring on this incredible champion, Anan Xola Lololi.
Thank you so much, my sister, Itah Sadu. Excellence always. Thank you. First of all, I'd like to give thanks to the Creator for having us here. I'd like to give thanks to Mama Africa, because Mama, we are celebrating you today. And this special day, this is your day. So, but first, I'd like to give thanks and give respect to where I am right now. I am in the Wassan Island in Lake Muskoka. Wassan Island is located in the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe. This territory is covered by the Robinson-Huron Treaty of 1850 and the William Treaty 1923. There are several neighboring First Nations communities whose ancestors lived in this area, including Rama, Wata, and Wasukasin. There are three more nations represented in the area: the Anishinaabe, Ojibwe, Potawatomi, and Mohawk. The Muskoka area is considered shared hunting ground among many indigenous nations. Community lived in this region in permanent villages or summer settlements historically. Chief Meske Uki or Miskwaki fought with the British during the War of 1812. The Muskoka region is named after him. The Mohawks of Wata First Nation were moved to this area in 1881 from Quebec after a dispute with the Catholic Church. My. The Pope just said the Catholic Church and the Canadian government committed genocide against the indigenous people. That is a sad day in history. But today is about celebration. And we're talking about the UN General Assembly 75th session. The resolution was adopted by the General Assembly on the 16th of December 2020. International Day for People of African Descent, reaffirming the purpose and the principles of the Charter of the United Nations and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights for the promotion and protection of all human rights and fundamental freedoms of all persons. Reaffirming also that the Universal Declaration of Human Rights establishes that all human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights, and that everyone is entitled to all rights and freedoms set forth therein, without distinction of any kind, such as race, color, sex, language, religion, political or other opinion, national or social origin, property, birth, or other status. Noting that 2021 will mark the 20th anniversary of the adoption of the Durban Declaration and the Program of Action, and recalling that 2020 marks the midterm review of the International Decade of People of African Descent. After December 2020, the resolution led by Costa Rica 2 years ago marked the inaugural observation of the International Day for People of African Descent. Mama, we honor and respect you, and we hope all over the world this day be a day that we give honor to you. To promote greater recognition and respect for the diverse heritage, cultures, and contributions of people of African descent to the development of societies, and to promote respect for the human rights and the fundamental freedoms of people of African descent. The day comes more than a century after the Universal Negro Improvement Association First International Convention closed on the 31st of August, 1920. We talking about over 100 years ago. At Liberty Hall in New York, Harlem neighborhood, the month-long gathering on human rights was led by UNIA founder and first president, General the Honorable Marcus Garvey. As my sister Itah has said, the first President General Marcus Garvey. We just celebrated his birthday on August 17. The celebration first marked the midway through of the International Decade of People of African Descent, I said again. And we want to make sure we focus on the recognition, justice, and development. So to commemorate this day, we would have conversations with institutions in Canada, nonprofit, and also the municipal government, to talk about the development that is critical as we move forward. We're speaking about recognition, justice, and development. So with that, people of Toronto, people of Canada. Celeste, could you run the slides? Let's have this conversation of why we are doing what we're doing. Today, the International Day of the People of African Descent, we're celebrating the diversity of people of African descent in Canada. We are like a little AU, a little CARICOM, folks in Central and South America. We are all here in Toronto, in Canada, all across the land. Next slide. The Black population has contributed to Canada's heritage since the arrival of Matthew da Costa, the navigator and interpreter for Pierre du Gua de Mons and Samuel Champlain, whose presence in Canada dates back to the early 1600s. Just to let everyone know, we are here since the 1600s, and we've been coming from that time since. Many different journeys, but we are here. Next slide. Canada is the top place of birth of the Black population. In 2016, more than 4 in 10 Black people were born in Canada. We're talking about over 480,000 folks. They have contributed in many ways to the growth, diversity, and development of the country. And the next speakers would elaborate more on this contribution to this country. Next slide. We are over 1.2 million people in Canada. Next slide. Black newcomers come from about 120 different countries. I'm going to say that again. We are Black newcomers from over 120 different countries. We are celebrating this diversity. And just to let folks know, from the city of Toronto, we're probably the city with the most diverse Black population, the most diverse people of African descent living in one city. We come from over 125 different countries. Next slide. People of African descent comes from 125 different countries. We have to say 2 times to let folks know how diverse we are in this city of Toronto. Next slide. More than 170 different places of birth for the Black immigrants in Canada. As you could see in the slide, from the Caribbean, from Africa, from Europe, from Central and South America, and even as far as Asia. We have people all over the world, and they come to live in Canada. Next slide. So there are 54 countries in Africa today, according to the United Nations. And you notice there are over 125 different countries. So not just Africa, but the Caribbean, Central and South America, Europe, and even Asia. We're here in Canada, and predominantly in the city of Toronto. Next slide. Overall, more than 200 ethnic or cultural origins were reported by Black populations in Canada. And again, I must say, we are celebrating the diversity of people of African descent who live in Canada. We are our own AU, our own CARICOM. As I said, we contributing a great amount to the diversity and the development of this country. Next slide. Ethnic origin refers to the ethnic or cultural origins of the respondent ancestors, and ancestors usually more distant than a grandparent. So just to get it clear, there's over 200 ethnic origins and people and ethnic or cultural origins. Next slide. Toronto is the largest Black population in the country, over 442,000 people. 36% of the Canada Black population. Next slide. Ontario is home to slightly more than half of the total Black population in Canada. Next slide. So this resource and this information came from Stats Canada. Thank you so much, Celeste, for this PowerPoint presentation, noting that recognizing the important contribution of women and girls of African descent to the development of societies and the promotion of mutual understanding and multiculturalism, and bearing in mind the program of activities for the implementation of the International Decade of People of African Descent, recalling once again on the 31st of August 1920, the first International Convention of the Negro people of the world ended in New York as a result of the discussion led by the Honorable Marcus Garvey. The Declaration of the Rights of the Negro people of the world was promulgated. I also like to say that this celebration predates United Nations. So we've been organizing for a very, very long time. So without no further ado, I'd like you to hear the voice of the Honorable Marcus Garvey and also the Honorable Martin Luther King.
The world in which we live today is divided into separate race groups and distinct nationalities. Each race and each nationality is endeavoring to work out its own destiny to the exclusion of other races and other nationalities. We hear the cry of England for the Englishman, of France for the Frenchman, of Germany for the German, of Ireland for the Irish, of Palestine for the Jews, of Japan for the Japanese, of China for the Chinese. We of the Universal Negro Movement Association are raising the cry of Africa for the Africans, those at home and those abroad. There are 400 million Africans in the world who have Negro blood coursing through their veins. And we believe that the time has come to unite these 400 million people for the one common purpose of bettering their condition. The great problem of the Negro for the last 500 years has been that of disunity. No one or no organization ever succeeded in uniting the Negro race. But within the last 4 years, the Universal Negro Movement Association has worked wonders in bringing together in one fold 4 million organized Negroes who are scattered in all parts of the world, being in the 48 states of the American Union, all the West Indian Islands, and the countries of South and Central America and Africa. These 4 million people are working to convert the rest of the 400 million scattered all over the world. And it is for this purpose that we are asking you to join our ranks and to do the best you can to help us to bring about an emancipated race. If anything praiseworthy is to be done, it must be done through unity.
The other thing is that America freed the slaves in 1863 through the Emancipation Proclamation of Abraham Lincoln, but gave the slaves no land or nothing in reality, and as a matter of fact, to get started on. At the same time, America was giving away millions of acres of land in the West and the Midwest, which meant that there was a willingness to give the white peasants from Europe an economic base. And yet it refused to give its black peasants from Africa, who came here involuntarily in chains and had worked free for 244 years, any kind of economic base. And so emancipation for the Negro was really freedom to hunger. It was freedom to the winds and rains of heaven. It was freedom without food to eat or land to cultivate, and therefore it was freedom and famine at the same time. And when white Americans tell the Negro to lift himself by his own bootstraps, they don't look over the legacy of slavery and segregation. I believe we ought to do all we can and seek to lift ourselves by our own bootstraps. But it's a cruel jest to say to a bootless man that he ought to lift himself by his own bootstraps. And many Negroes, by the thousands and millions, have been left bootless as a result of all of these years of oppression and as a result of a society that deliberately made his color a stigma and something worthless and degrading.
Yes, thank you so much, the Honorable Marcus Garvey and the Honorable Martin Luther King. So, to commemorate this day, which focuses on rights and choices and leaving no one behind, the Black Food Sovereignty Toronto and partners would like to commemorate the day to deliver a special message on the work and development in Toronto and across Canada. As the Universal Declaration of Human Rights proclaim, all human beings are born free and equal in dignity and human rights. The ugliest chapters of human history have shown that what happened when those rights are denied and violated. To this day, such abominations continue around the world. Our work does not stop until those chapters come to a necessary end. A luta continua. Thank you so much. Back to you, Itah Sadu.
Information, 1.2 million people, 125 different countries we come from and we hail from. Oh my gosh, nobody can ever ask us again, in a taxi, at the border, in school, in the supermarket, are you from Jamaica? Oh my gosh, yes, Jamaica 125 times. So thank you too for that information. Thank you also too for the memory of our great leaders, whether it be Marcus Garvey or Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., reminding us about the source and the origins of the oppression of our people. But hey, we are mighty people, and I always like to use this analogy. We are limbo dancers. Doesn't matter how low the bar is, we still can come from under the bar. And the same time you were talking, I was also thinking, like, are there any Ukrainians of African descent that came to Canada in one of those waves, and do we need to be talking to them? But you have given us information to think about and to discuss and to share. And I couldn't help but thinking that we are speaking all about race, but there's also the notion of class, there's the notion of genders. And I believe it is both Dr. King, but I think Marcus Garvey made the point that we can do greatness and greater things when we unify. And I'm here on the record to say that we are a people who are united, and we've got to push back against that propaganda narrative that can always say to us, no, you people are not united. But I don't know of any experience. If I feel bad or something is happening or whatever the situation is, I know I can pick up the phone or I can reach out to someone of African descent. And surely I know that they will come to the rescue. They're going to help, and they will give more love. And in case that you just tuned in and thinking, why is Itah talking a whole lot? You are tuned into the International Day for People of African Descent, brought to you by the Black Food Sovereignty Toronto and its partners. And now I'm going to go to our next speaker, having identified that we are not all from Jamaica, but we come from 125 different countries across the world. And if you are people who play the lottery, it may be a good day to go 1.2, 125, some of those numbers that Brother Anan shared with us. And now we're going to go to another mighty brother, and this is Amanuel Melles. And Amanuel Melles always, like Bell Hook, like Adrazina Mandela, or even DB, always writes his name in lowercase. And this is, as he says, to preserve humility. And as you know, Amanuel is the executive director at Network for the Advancement of Black Communities, NABC. He brings to us newsletters every week, almost every week, giving us information about job postings, funding, opportunities that we can be engaged with and involved with. And also too, don't tell anybody that I told you this, but he's also too a marine biologist. And every time that I see him, I get excited because I'm a girl of the water and of the ocean. So it is wonderful to have a conversation with someone who can appreciate coral reefs and all of the great bounty that the oceans can give to us. He is a social entrepreneur with more than 26 years of senior management roles in various subsectors of the nonprofit sector, settlement, and immigration. So put your hands together and let's welcome another A, awesome, Amanuel Melles.
My sister Itah Sadu, I don't know how I'm going to follow you, and I'm going to follow Elder Anan, but most importantly, thank you so much for your kind introduction. The newsletters that come into your inbox and the inbox of our networks across the country are the labor of love of my colleagues at NABC, the Network for the Advancement of Black Communities. I am also joining you from Wasan Island, where I have the unique privilege of sharing this island this week with Elder Anan and 19 other Black leaders for the first time, to really be in each other's presence to explore how we can advance, if you want, the cause of Black communities or people of African descent. Very, very humbled and honored to be here. As I was listening to Anan, as I was listening to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and our stalwart Marcus Garvey, I couldn't but also be thinking about John Lewis and how he reminds us about the need to do good travel. I think it's a day of celebration today. I was born in Asmara, in the highlands of Eritrea, in East Africa. And I grew up there, really raised by the village. As we've been talking a lot here about how it takes a village to raise a child in Africa. And I think one of the things that in the context of celebrating people of African descent, one of the things that I've always want us to really put more attention, and Itah, you spoke to this in many respects, is the need for us to actually acknowledge what is good in our communities, intentionally have an appreciative inquiry lens, an asset-based lens, and lift up what's actually working for our Black communities. And that doesn't take away from the necessary and difficult conversations that we need to have among ourselves, but also with everyone else about what needs to change. The UN Decade of People of African Descent, for many things that could be said about the decade, if anything, it gives us kind of a roadmap to really focus our attention on things that matter or have consequences for our people of African descent. And I will be talking about that momentarily in terms of what are kind of what's the call of leadership for all of us when we celebrate today, when we think about the decade. But most importantly, how do we do that in such a way that uplifts the assets that we have in our village? Sometimes we take too much time really pinpointing what's not working, what's getting in the way, what our deficits are. I think today is a reminder for all of us that, in fact, we have a lot to celebrate. We have a lot to celebrate because not only, as Itah is reminding us, we're a big component of this planet in terms of people. We're an important part of this country we call Canada. We're indigenous to many lands in this planet. We're indigenous to this land in this country. And it's an opportunity for us to pause and say that we are rich as a family, we are rich as a community, in terms of the cultures and the value systems that we have, the gifts that we have, the capabilities that we have, the wisdom that we have, not only of our elders, the wisdom and the dynamic leadership of our young leaders, or our sisters and mothers, of all the components of our society. If we pause and say, how do we channel this beauty, this energy, then we have a lot to celebrate. Yes, the UN Decade of People of African Descent, through the pillars of development, justice, and recognition, as I said, give us a roadmap. But we need to go back to our roots and say, in what ways actually our ancestors brought us change, made change possible. As Marcus Garvey did, as many leaders in our communities have done over generations, They responded to the call of leadership, the call of conscience. They rallied the troops. They rolled up their sleeves and they made things happen. Today, as we celebrate this important day, I think we have to honor that we have reached this point on the shoulders of many giants. Many of them are in our presence today. But I think the call of leadership for all of us today is to imagine the type of change, as Marcus Garvey did and others did. Imagine the type of change that we need to have for our communities for the times that we are not around. So part of this, as we celebrate, is how do we actually plant the seeds that will germinate, you know, that will lead to the type of ecosystems that will work for our communities 20, 30, 40, 50 years and more down the road. I've always reminded myself and my peers around me, if there's something that we can learn from indigenous communities, is the outlook that they have of the 7 generations. And I say, like, if we cannot even imagine that far, let's think and plan for at least 1 or 2, 3 generations. And that, sisters and brothers, it means that we have to really appreciate the type of leadership that's going to take us there. That, again, I have purpose, I have presence, I have meaning because of all of you. There are enough Afrocentric values that could guide us to be there. And I think one of the things that I really want us to pause and think as we celebrate, what is my contribution to this story? What are the seeds that I'm planting? And I think in doing that, we need to really be intentional about what's the type of collective servant leadership that we need to foster, to amplify, to support, to nurture, so that we get to that land, to that destiny that we want. Few weeks ago, many of us, probably a few of you in this call, might have been in Halifax. We had more than 1,000 leaders from our communities from across the country converging on Halifax, being hosted by our brothers and sisters, the Afro-Nova Scotians. We had the opportunity to actually take the pulse, if you want, of the state of affairs of our people of African descent in this country. And you have heard that the coming together of that energy, of that beauty, led to something that's called the Halifax Declaration, a bold state of slew of statements embedded in the declaration that pretty much amplify some of the things that for generations people of African descent in this country and other parts of the world have been calling for, struggling, creating the path for. The need to be recognized as a distinct group in this country. Our ancestors here, our folks didn't come yesterday. Yes, there are folks that came here yesterday. I came here 30 years ago. There are folks that have come here way long before that. And Brother Anan made reference to that. So there are a number of important, markers and milestones in the Halifax Declaration that we need to kind of socialize, take it across the country, engage with folks, and say, let's lift the declaration together. Because when you start looking at the declaration and educating people and creating the opportunities for engagement, you will see that there are important pillars related to the UN Declaration of People of African Descent, related to justice, related to development, underdevelopment around education, employment, housing. There are important elements in the declaration that are very specific about justice. So as we celebrate, I think one of the things that we want to remind ourselves is that the work ahead is equally important as the work that has been done by our elders, by our ancestors. And I think we have the opportunity here in Carpe Diem, so to speak, to really respond to the call of leadership. And so we do that by actually building the village, by amplifying, strengthening the nodes, building on what's working, uplifting each other, bridging, creating that collective sense of responsibility and moving forward. I was really inspired by what I've experienced in Halifax, talking to Afro-Nova Scotian leaders, learning about their road to prosperity, to economic empowerment, the 5-year plan that they have devised there. I was really inspired by what I have heard about the readiness and commitment for change from our brothers and sisters from Calgary, for example, our brothers from across the country, our sisters that came from Ontario, from all over this land. So as I reflect on this day, I'm reminded here that yes, the decade as a legacy ending 2024, so those pillars that are known to all of us, is important to really think about what are some of the bold legacy initiatives that we're going to end 2024 with. But equally important is kind of sense making and engaging with governments and philanthropy and everybody involved to say, what is the progress that we have made against those 3 pillars? So that there is a bit of an accounting, an accountability that we need to do in terms of really paving the way for what's coming in front of us. And what's coming in front of us is educating our leaders, engaging our governments at every level, our philanthropy allies, our sector allies, that now the decade is actually, it's a permanent forum at the UN. So we need to start having conversations before 2024 about the implications of the permanence of the decade. And also recognize that across this globe, advocates from people of African descent have actually advocated a lot to make sure that the decade is not just a decade, but it's a permanent forum, just like the indigenous decade that we have seen that's now a permanent forum. So I think it's very important for us to start having conversations. And this is where I think this is one of call of leadership for all of us, to start creating the conditions and the space to have conversations and engagements among ourselves. What are the implications of this permanency that we have in front of us? And having that discussion from a place of strength and concreteness and saying, what's the progress that we have made so far? I mean, I was part of a group of 33 leaders from our communities that met in Gatineau in 2019, summer 2019, when the federal government starts to acknowledge and respond by investing on the decade. Some of you are familiar with the federal Supporting Black Canadian Communities initiatives. That's one of those initiatives that came out of those conversations and the recognition of the decade. When you look at the pillar of development, you see housing. Yes, there are some incremental steps taken, but the reality is that Black communities are nowhere participating in the national multi-billion national housing strategy. Why? What are some things that are getting in the way that collectively we need to work with government to create a new paradigm and new reality for Black communities? So there's a lot of stuff ahead of us, but today is about celebrating. It's acknowledging our assets, acknowledging what's working. When I talk to folks, I value and cherish the wisdom and the knowledge of our elders. But also I'm so hopeful and inspired by our young leaders across the country. We are in safe hands. We have dynamic young leaders that are here leading. How do we amplify and support them? And how do we yield when it's necessary? Here at Wasan, meeting with a lot of Black leaders, we have announced that our first elder in residence, who is Elder Anan, who will be working with us and all of you interested in really promoting that concept of eldership in our communities. How do we actually recognize, amplify, enable, support our elders so that they can be good mentors? They could support our young leaders. They could pass the baton in such a way that we plant those seeds that I was talking about earlier on. So thank you so much for having me here today with you. I'm honored to join this engagement, this session, this celebration with my elder and brother Anan from Wasan. And I look forward to continuing walking in the path of change and celebration and collective leadership with all of you. Back to you, my sister Itah.
Thank you, Amanuel. It's always good to see you, and you are somewhere in beautiful country. And thank you for bringing your words to us. And while you were sharing, someone of 90 years said that what she heard in your speech is that we should continue to be considerate of each other and the possibilities that we come with. She went on to say that the other thing that she heard in your speech was you spoke to understanding of each other and to be understanding. Actually, the gift of understanding is probably one of the greatest gifts that there is, because it helps you to see things as they are and not things as you think they are. So I'm giving a big props to someone of 19 years old who happens to be my mother, who came over with her little notes to tell me what she thought that you said. And then the third note that she made on her little piece of paper, this little piece of paper, is the word faith, that we should have faith in our ability. I'm feeling as though I'm having a Sankofa moment, because we had Anan on one end, and now you have you two now pushing us and propelling us to think about the future, to think about our contributions as individuals. Because sometimes, you think you got to do the big. But even today, in this forum, as simple as it is, it will add to something which will then continue to be greater and greater. So good people out there, even today, if you smile with somebody, even today, if you showed an act of kindness, even today, if you did something that you hated doing, but oh my gosh, when you got it done, it felt good because it liberated and uplifted someone else. When we add up all these things, and I go on record to say that we are people of multiplication and addition. We're not subtraction people. We got to push back on that narrative too. But whenever we came up together, and they say in Jamaican language, every mickle is a muckle. I want to also give a shout out at this time to Celeste Series, who is on our tech. She has been a breath of fresh air to work with. She's holding it down. So put your hands together wherever you are in this virtual space and big up the sister, because she is really holding it down. And one other thing, Amanuel, you also reminded us that when you're doing good, you are in the black. Oh my gosh. Because we've got so many negatives about black. But one thing we do know, when that bell at the stock exchange go off, or whatever it is, or when the accountant looks at your books and the accountant says, you're in the black, ay, people of African descent, it's a good time to rejoice that we have found something incredibly beautiful and favorable to say about blackness. But we're moving along again. And of course, you can type your questions, your comments in, keep that stuff rolling. And when we see them, I'm going to report back to you. And I'm moving now to the other A, because I told you it's an awesome day. Anan, Amanuel, Omar, and now we're going to Anthony Morgan. And Anthony Morgan is another incredible brother. He has appeared in a lot of places and at all levels of court. He has represented before the Supreme Court of Canada. And right now there is so much conversation about the Supreme Court of Canada, midwives in the Supreme Court of Canada. And we are not even going to cross the border today to talk about the Supreme Court of our cousins, who probably, are doing all kinds of interesting things over there, repealing laws, all kinds of things. He's also represented the interest of African Canadians before the United Nations human rights treaty bodies. So Anthony is a racial justice analyst and strategist, and he's an educator and a lawyer. He's the manager of the City of Toronto's Confronting Anti-Black Racism Unit. And this unit is responsible for the implementation of the Toronto Action Plan to confront anti-Black racism. Whenever I see him, I always feel that I'm in the presence of greatness. And he too comes through with quiet humility. So I want us, wherever we are, to put our hands together and welcome one of our young and dynamic legal minds here in the city of Toronto, Anthony Morgan.
All right. Thank you so much for that tremendously warm introduction. Can you hear me okay? All right, excellent. Thank you, Elder Haita. It's always, as other folks have noted, it's always something to follow Elder Haita, but to not just follow her, but Elder Emmanuel, Elder Zola. These are folks who've committed um, tremendous years of struggle and engagement and organizing for our communities in a spirit of love and upliftment. And so to be able to join this panel is incredibly humbling for me, and I'm really thankful for the opportunity to share. Um, Now, I want to present some information about what we're doing at the City of Toronto through the Confronting Anti-Black Racism Unit to advance the rights and well-being of Black Torontonians. And I, of course, we'll get to that, but I do think it's worth saying a couple of words in recognition of how special this day is. When you think about the ways in which uh, Canada has a penchant for seeking to invisibilize the experiences, the histories, the traumas, the successes, the heights, and the values of people of African descent. We see the importance of coming together, whether we're big or small, whether it's in person or virtual. It is exceptionally important for us to find ways to reconnect with each other, because in doing so, we reconnect with ourselves. And one of the fundamental things that was stolen from us through the processes of the transatlantic slave trade and enslavement was really that right and that ability to develop ourselves on our own terms for each other, for our collective. Now, fast forward to today, we are under immense pressure as Black communities in the areas of employment, education, housing, healthcare, criminal justice systems, child welfare systems, you name it. But we have a day like today that helps us recognize and note that, of course, those struggles are real and they're active and they put pressure on our lives. But here we are, we're still standing, we're still finding ways to connect under this umbrella of the International Day for People of African Descent, which has already been effectively been spoken to. It's part of an overarching aim that the international community is seeking to push across the world, not just in Canada, but across the world, to have states more fully recognize and respect the rights of people of African descent and our historical contributions and ongoing struggles. But how has that looked at the City of Toronto level? What I want to do in the time that I have is speak a bit about the work of the Confronting Anti-Black Racism Unit, and why that is not to celebrate myself uh, or our team, of course, who I'm very proud of, and I'm proud of the work that we get to do. We carry forward a legacy that was largely seeded by our elder Inania Eodeli Grant, and also our current executive director Denise Andrea Campbell. Uh, but I think it's not to celebrate ourselves as proud as we are, but it's really to help uh, crystallize or offer an example of what is possible when our communities come together to advance and envision change. Now, some of you may be familiar with the fact that the Toronto Action Plan to confront anti-Black racism was adopted by City Council in December 2017, and it came as a response to the outcry across Black communities in the City of Toronto that was largely led by and most popularized by the Black Lives Matter movement in Toronto at the time, to say, you know what, Black communities have been struggling. We're not just struggling now, but we've been struggling for decades to be properly recognized, respected, and have our rights not trampled upon. And so ultimately, that movement emerging back in 2016. So I'm not talking about 2020. I'm talking about 2016, when that or original, or sometimes referred to as the first wave of Black Lives Matter in Toronto, emerged. That led the city to think very critically about the treatment and experiences of Black people across the city, and think about, well, what needs to be done to address some of the longstanding challenges Black communities have been facing. And initially, there was a feeling or a thought about just doing another report on the status of Black communities in the city. The Black communities rallied, they raised their voices and said, no, we're not doing another report. The city of Toronto needs to adopt a full a full plan to address the socioeconomic well-being and marginalization of Black communities that centers Black folks and the needs of our communities, and do so in a way that is collaborative and deeply engages our communities. And so, from that voicing from Black communities, the City of Toronto, with the leadership of, as I mentioned, Denise Andrea Campbell, our current executive director at the City of Toronto in the Social Development and Finance and Administration division of the city, uh, she connected with uh, Ainania Ayodele Grant, who would become the manager of the Confronting Anti-Black Racism Unit, and together they strategized and organized and connected with, I'm sure, many of the great folks who are participating in this session, but surely Elder Emmanuel, Elder Zola, Elder Itah, and many others, to get the voices of elders and the collective voices of Black communities to inform what a strategy for change would actually look like. And so since December 2017, the City of Toronto has had the Toronto Action Plan to confront anti-Black racism. But it didn't stop there. Black communities also said that when we look across Canada, what tends to happen is if we do get to the point of actually talking openly about anti-Black racism, then what follows is often a putting that agenda in the mix with other agendas, other equity agendas that are valuable and important, but have their distinct uh, differences, even when we acknowledge intersectionality of Black experiences. So Black communities said, we're not going to have that done. We're not going to stick the confronting anti-Black racism plan onto somebody else's agenda. There needs to be a team, a permanent team that is permanently funded within the City of Toronto that focuses exclusively on implementing the Toronto Action Plan. And so now we have the Confronting Anti-Black Racism Unit, which was adopted by the City of Toronto as an initiative to move the action plan forward in February 2018, and started being staffed up with Anania Grant as the founding manager of the organization in May 2018. And since then, we've been undertaking a number of measures to support the well-being of our Black communities in various areas that are part of the City of Toronto's mandate. And so, what I want to do with the rest of my time is just speak to some of the highlights of the work that we're proud to have been able to do since May 2018. Now, often you hear conversations about the importance of training, and we are clear that training will not solve everything, sorry, but it certainly helps advance a culture of change within an organization. And so one of the things we're proud of is that since 2018 we've been able to have mandatory anti-Black racism training for almost 30,000 City of Toronto staff, but also folks working in agencies of the city. So that includes the TTC, Toronto Community Housing, Toronto Police, and the sort. And overwhelmingly, the response to that training has been quite positive, where folks are learning things that they hadn't known or understood about the histories and experiences of Black people in Toronto specifically. We've also championed race-based disaggregated data as an initiative for the city, and that is a process that is ongoing. We recognize that there's still a long way to go, but overwhelmingly, if you look at our dominant institutions across Canadian society, they have a deep resistance, hesitation, and avoidance of collecting and then openly reporting race-based disaggregated data. Now, the CABR unit, the Confronting Anti-Black Racism Unit, hasn't changed that entirely. That hesitation still exists in many corners, but overwhelmingly, if you look at the progress that's been made in addressing things like COVID or funding within our communities, you see that the city is starting to collect this information and report on it, and then develop policy that is specifically targeted to the needs of Black Torontonians. And that's something that we've been pushing with the support of our communities, of our elders, of our different professionals across our communities. Another major initiative that many of you folks may have heard of is the Black Mental Health Week, which happens in the first full week of March of every year. That was an initiative that we came forward with after having conversations with our community partners and being led with led with another organization within community, of course, Taibu Community Health Center, saying, you know what, we need to destigmatize mental health challenges within our communities, and we need to create a platform and a campaign that normalizes these conversations, and more than that, pushes our institutions and organizations to actually develop a collective response where we're not just having conversation, but actually building policy, building frameworks, devoting resources towards making sure that we are protecting and advancing the mental well-being and health of black people in our city, but of course beyond. Making sure that black people are able to more actively participate in decision making and change making at the city has also been a large part of our focus. And so one of the organizations, or one of the entities that deeply informs our work, is the Partnership and Accountability Circle, which is a collective of 12 Black Torontonians, 4 elders, 4 youth, and 4 community stakeholders who come together and help make sure that we as an office are upholding our side of the bargain by taking this action plan and actually helping to deliver it in a way that has integrity for Black communities. And there is simply no other organization that we know of that is connected to government that has a format of this sort, and that we use with the Confronting Anti-Black Racism Unit, that also has a partnership and accountability body that helps keep the organization accountable. And together, the CABR unit and the Partnership and Accountability Circle annually reports to council on the progress of the implementation of the Toronto Action Plan to confront anti-Black racism. And from our research and understanding, there's simply no greater grounding of accountability that an organization that serves Black communities at this level has, where they have an annual report to the highest level of their respective government on how things are going. And that's what we do annually, and that's part of our commitment to our communities and our devotion to making sure that we are not working for the city in a way that works across purposes, but there's a level of transparency and understanding of how we are working, who we are working with, and the aims we seek to advance. Another body that has emerged is the Confronting Anti-Black Racism Advisory Committee. I want to speak to this because it is another important way in which we at the Confronting Anti-Black Racism Unit are working with our partners in the city to make sure that Black people are more fully participating in decision making and change making in the city. And so the Confronting Anti-Black Racism Advisory Committee, CABRAC for short, advises city council very specifically on addressing anti-Black racism. Again, this is a structure that simply does not exist anywhere else. There is no other municipality that we know of, or organ of government, that actually has a body of appointed folks from Black communities to address the concerns of Black communities. And another unique piece about this that is relevant for our conversation today is that the mandate of the CABRAC is focused specifically on advancing the International Decade for People of African Descent. And so many municipalities have been reaching out to us to understand how is it that we've been able to do this. And in short, I would say, while of course we have a great team with great ideas, it's only with our communities coming forward and saying, well, these are the ways in which we want to see ourselves represented. These are the kinds of changes we want to see. We want to see ourselves in leadership and direct city building leadership opportunities. We have other structures like a Black resilience cluster that brings folks together from our community stakeholders, to identify, plan, and strategize for advancing the well-being of Black communities. But there's also a policy frameworks that we've advanced, a Black mandated funding framework to ensure that the funding that goes into the communities more generally also has a specific focus on making sure that resourcing goes to Black communities. We most recently in November of last year adopted a Black food sovereignty plan, and of course this is where our relationship with Black food sovereignty Toronto really crystallized and got going. It didn't start there, but it's actually one of the greatest fruits of that relationship and conversation. We have a number of initiatives related to Little Jamaica to make sure that we're preserving the place, heritage, and belonging of Black people within that fast changing corridor that is connected to many of the hearts and minds of our folks within the city. And then another initiative that some may have heard of is uh, the recognition and review project. Some folks note more specifically as the renaming Dundas Street project, but that's really only one part of the initiative. The recognition review project seeks to look at all of city assets, look at how we are naming parks, how we are naming spaces, how we're naming agencies, and making sure that we reinsert and move against the invisibilization of Black people, and make sure that our children and our children's children can walk along streets, go to parks, enter buildings, play in gyms with names and values that reflect people of African descent and the contributions that we've made to this city. Now, there's so many more things that I could share that I would love to share about what we've been able to do at the City of Toronto in a very short time. But I will end here and yield to the rest of the program. If you want to learn more about what the Confronting Anti-Black Racism Unit has been up to, strongly encourage you to check out our website at toronto.ca/ABR. Back to you, Itah, Elder Itah.
Thank you, Anthony Morgan. I told you he was a lawyer. You notice what he said at the very last. He's going to stop and yield. You see, that's lawyer talking, We're going to yield the point. We're going to step back, step down. Oh my gosh, I told you he was a lawyer. But thank you for reminding us that confronting anti-Black racism is an everyday activity. Thank you for reminding us. You can't stop. You can't let up on this thing. It has to become habit. And sometimes when people hear the word habit, they think of things that are negative, but habits are positive and cool, good things too. So to confront anti-Black racism and the work that you do, you are in the business of it, and it's an everyday business. I'm so pleased to hear about all the clusters too that surround you and support you, because you need those clusters, whether they're in policy, whether they're in an advisory role, whether they're in a strategic role, because this work could kill you. All right. So you need lots of people around you lifting you up, sharing the heavy lifting, and also too, as been said before, bringing together that unification of our purpose. So I was pleased to hear you say all those things. And I thank you for calling me Elder Itah. Me and you, we have this conversation about that. But today I'm rocking the Lisa Left Flam. So you are entitled to say Elder Itah as I rock the Lisa Left Flam.
I love it, always.
You always gotta come with game. But in all seriousness, I'm also too happy that you also touched on the impact that racism has on our physicality, in our wellness, in our mental health. Also pleased too that you gave a shout out to the sister Anania and to Denise in the great work that they are doing and have done at the City of Toronto as we all confront anti-Black racism. So that was Anthony Morgan. And I told you that every time that I see him, I get super excited because I always think that I'm in the presence of greatness. And to say to you, Anthony, too, on behalf of all of this, the job and the work that you do, we don't take it lightly. We know that it is not something that is just like chewing gum or eating an apple, but we know that it takes perseverance, it takes commitment, it takes purpose, and it takes an incredible dedication to change the hearts of people who drill down in the oppression of our people. So thank you for your words and for being part of this incredible day as we continue to celebrate the International Day for People of African Descent, looking back, looking forward, and looking at our everyday activity. Now, if we were to sell new books in the world, I mean, back in the day, you had those colonial books that would just drive you crazy. G for gun. Oh my gosh. You see, something to make you think about, keep you in check. Q for queen. I don't know why they couldn't have just said G is for Guyana. There you go. Shoot, we would have been exposed to a whole nother country. G is for greatness, something like that. But G was always in those colonial primary readers forgotten. And then they would roll you up and they would say K is for the king. And oh my gosh, you looked at the king didn't look at you. And then there was Q is for queen, and the queen didn't look at you. You start to lose your mind. But here today, Q is for Quammie, as in Quammie Williams. You might have gone to his incredible farm and experience camping, just being out in nature, just being one with the land, just having groundings and conversation around fires with community. And that is the Adinkra farm. So if you haven't gone there, check it out. But you will probably know him as a master drummer, someone who is engaged in film, so many talents. Anytime that I worked on a project and I wanted it to be real good or top of the line, you know, Brother Quammie was one of those people that I would call, and people usually do. And he always, always, always came with his A game. So put your hands together and welcome from outside of the GTA, Quammie Williams.
Greetings, 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 greetings. I want to bring you lots of love, African people, from a Dinkra farm. I can't tell you how much and how blessed I feel today to be celebrating a day for people of African descent. Amazing, amazing, amazing. You know, I want to tell you that, you know, I was a very fortunate as a child. You know, I had a grandfather. His name was Percival Quammie. And my grandfather told me that I was an African very, very early in life. And I realize now in my later stage that he actually saved me an incredible amount of trouble, because I have been a Pan-Africanist for my entire existence, as long as I have known myself. And so today I want to give a shout out to my grandfather. And I also want to give a shout out to the artists who helped to form the glue, the gel that brings us together in celebration. Because, you know, as African people, our art, our music, dance, visual art forms are all part of the great expression that we have that makes us who we are and helps us to connect with each other. And so on that note, I also want to give a shout to my brother Iwata, who is with the ancestors, who is an ancestor now, but who had a marked impression on the lives of myself and many others. And Iwata said, "Hear the voices crying in the wilderness, seeking the way, the truth and the light. Hear the voices crying in the wilderness, seeking the way, the truth and the light. It's time, my brothers and sisters, we stop the fuss and fight. We stop the fussing and fight. It's time we get together. And it's time we live upright in Jaja's sight. Hear the voices crying in the wilderness, speaking the way, the truth and the light." Yes, my brother. I went away, I leave and I come back home, I come back to stay. away. I went away, I leave and I come back home. I come back to stay. I must see my way. I went away, searching for another world. Trying to run away from my destiny. In another world, a world that was strange to me. Tried to change my name, tried to change my identity. Strong is the power of love and the power of freedom. Power of justice fills my heart. I come back to stay. I said strong is the power of love and the power of freedom. Power of justice fills my heart, yeah. I must see my way. I went away. I come back away. I must see my way. I went away. I leave and I come back to stay. I must see my way. I must see my way. I'll come back to stay. Africa. We must see our way. If we stay together, strengthen in our unity, let's teach it to our children so that they too will continue to celebrate our African identity, our African economy, our African spirituality, and most of all, our African greatness. Be blessed.
Yes, thank you, Brother Quammie, all the way from the Adinkra farm. Thank you for your words. Thank you for your drumming. And when we write the book, P will not be for police, but it will be for Percival. There you go. There we go. We will record that and we will say that he's a man that showed us the way. Yes, we must see our way. So thank you for your presentation. And it is always great to be in your company. And you look as though you are in a place right now that was just made and created with love and goodness. And you're wearing the color green. So that also too, at this juncture too, signals that we are on the move. And you made me think of Trinidad calypsos and out and soca. And they always say, are you ready? So anytime now that we hear that is now, are we ready to wine? But are you ready? What am I ready for? What is my contribution? Are you ready for this? What am I ready for? Where's the train going? How is it happening? So thank you. Just giving us that simple reframe. We must see our way. Yes, we must see our way because that's the only way we know how to do it. For the people, by the people, of the people. Loving up all of you, my brother. Enough respect.
Enough respect. You look beautiful. Good to see you again.
Oh, there you go. You see, this is the International Day, and we're pointed on thick. Not that we didn't do it yesterday, and we will not do it again tomorrow. But today is a day we just buzz in with love and just buzz in with joy. And I know Anthony said before, you know, we can't just celebrate ourselves. No, stop that. Stop that. You know, we go into the spaces and people say, like, who you are, what's your worth? And we're like, well, I'm really humble and I can't really say how good I am and what kind of things that we do. No. That's colonial stuff. We got bragging rights. So let's amplify our voices and our noise so that we can drown some of the other people who are sucking up all the oxygen in the universe. And for some reason, too, you made me think. You made me think about this. And this is the plight of African Americans. You got to get real smart and real quick. This is also for Canadians, too, because in November, you might wake up and you can't vote. So there we go. There we go. But there are a number of people who made this incredible afternoon and evening possible. And we want to thank them. We want to thank them. Of course, this has been brought to you by the Black Food Sovereignty Working Group or Black Food Sovereignty Toronto. And they would like to thank the African FoodBasket, yay, the Confronting Anti-Black Racism Unit at the City of Toronto, Toronto Metropolitan University, the Center for Studies in Food Security, the Network for the Advancement of Black Communities, Afri-Can, big shout out to them and the great work that they did during the COVID vaccines, all kinds of good things Floydine and her team had going on. The Caribbean African Canadian Social Services, Metcalf Foundation, Tropicana Community Services, and the Government of Canada Summer Jobs Program. So we want to thank all our partners and all our sponsors for engaging with this collaboration this evening. And of course, are there questions? Of course there are questions. If they're Black people, you know you got to ask a little something. And this question is, there is a question. How, and this question goes to anyone, to any of our panelists, and it's from Morris Beckford. How you doing, Morris Beckford? You have been in the trenches for a very long time, so shout out to you. Good to see you are on the call. How do we prevent reversion? Thinking about Carol Anderson's White Rage, the rise of white supremacy, and attack on affirmative action right after the civil rights movement. The current attack on critical race theory, because people in America can't spell and they don't understand this thing, and race dialogues, the rise of the Black right. So there's a big question, big potatoes out there on the table. And so I'm going to turn it over to our panelists to engage in a response to that question.
Thank you so much for your eloquent delivery of what you do, the Itah style. I like to give a plug to a different book list. But when we're talking and to prevent reversion, you got to make sure we combat racism with knowledge, with the real facts. And if you want to get the real deal on the real history, you have to go where, Itah?
To a different book list. And while you're there, you can just step over into the other aisle and land on the Blackhurst Cultural Center. And then you know what? You can lift up knowledge, love it up, put your hands on it, touch it, kiss it, pass it to a friend, and even write something again and again. So there you go.
Right. So when we combating racism, we gotta combat racism with knowledge. We gotta know our history. Okay, so we could defend ourselves. We have to make sure we keep ourselves educated. And as you were saying, you know, we got young, sharp folks like Anthony Morgan. We got lots of young people right now who as Amanuel said, they're ready for the battle, you know. So it's about getting the knowledge, critical race theory. It's about getting the right knowledge. It's about getting knowledge into the schools, because they have to acknowledge what happened. There's my little piece, and I can turn it over to the other panelists to see what they have to say in relation to the question posed.
A bit of perspective. Thanks for the question. I think we need to go back again to that framework that you indicate of people of African descent, and under that pillar we have recognition. And if you look at that, there are a number of possibilities there, the call of leadership to governments and countries about how they should strengthen and build the capacity and competence of Black communities to actually fight hate and racism. And if we, in the context of the Canadian space here, and then I think using that local global here, as we think about the implications of the permanence of the forum, how can we give space to really, beyond allyship, you know, bring solidarity and support to the struggle that's going on in the United States, for example, around critical race theory. But here in Canada, I think we have the opportunity to look at a number of instruments that both provincial and federal are in place to start to look in how do we actually strengthen our collective capacity to counter anti-Black hate, for example. Yeah. So within the context of, in Ontario, of the anti-racism directorate work, the strategic review of the current anti-racism plan, which has come to its the closure of its 5-year plan, and before we think about the next 5 year, in terms of the plan, how do we actually work within Black communities to make sure that in the strategic review of the current anti-racism plan and, you know, paving the way for the next 5 years, we embed this fight against anti-Black racism, this fight against anti-Black hate. And part of that is beyond just, you know, kind of the call of leadership, is like organizations that are there, including ours. How do we create enabling structures for people and leaders and communities to be able to concretely do the fight? Yeah, it's not just talking about, it's not engagement only. I always remind us about creating enabling structures that allow the leadership in the community to really take the fight where it needs to go. So that's kind of the things that I can offer in terms of the question.
Anthony, you want to go ahead?
No, I defer to you, Elder Quammie.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think that in the current climate, you know, one of the things that we must really be careful to do is to constantly understand ourselves and our struggle from the position of continuance. You know, I spoke earlier about, you know, my grandfather and, you know, the education that he gave me as a boy and so on. Now, if we understand history, we will not be surprised that there is an attempt to silence the voices of African people when they are shedding light on the atrocities, etc. You know, when I look at the situation in the U.S., you know, I mean, it is sad, but sometimes I laugh because I often remember that, you know, those of us who experience colonialism in full force know that these people controlled the presses that fueled the education in our school systems. They did everything possible in order to make sure that African people in the West felt as though we should be fortunate to have been stripped from our lands and brought to be free labor. This was done fairly, you know, successfully. They made some headway with this. So now that people's eyes, you know, the veil is being lifted, we certainly couldn't anticipate that people are going to become more and more woke, as the young folks say, and have no response from folks who have made their wealth, riches, all of their prosperity on our ignorance. So we expect a battle. Now, how do we respond to that battle? I think Brother Zola hit it right on the head. Anan hit it right on the head when he said, you know, education. So the first thing is we have to educate our own people so that our children who are in the school systems are not falling prey, right, to what's about to happen. Because right now, you know, we're looking at an attempt at reversion, but you know what's going to happen eventually is actually revision. Okay, and we have to make sure that we are educating our people, our children, starting very young, so that they are aware in the world of who they are and what they need to do. And secondly, we need to educate all other peoples. Canada is a multi-racial, Toronto is the most multicultural city in the world. And what I found is that many of the people who are here, who are South Asian, you know, from other communities, they have also been part of the colonial education and have no clue about what the history of Black people in North America and the racism. They have no clue about what that actually is. They have no clue about how Europeans have built their enormous wealth and capacity off of our free labor and so on, and continue to exploit us, you know, around the world. So they don't know that. We have to teach them that. So I would say that one of the key things that we need to do is educate not only our own people, but to educate the other people who share Canada with us at this point, because we're going to need their support too. the ones who want to stand up against atrocities and the ones who want to stand up for the rights of humanity. We need their support as well.
I'm going to wait in for just one second. You're making me think of Sister Manifa Owusu. And Sister Manifa Owusu would always say, when you've always got to protect the big lie. And the big lie is that colonial experience, that colonial period, all of that. And in order to protect the big lie, you have to keep the ongoing oppression of people. And again, as you said, Quammie, what we have said, and all of you, what we've seen over the years is, and if we advance, then there is some sort of pushback or some sort of repercussion. We have Tulsa, Oklahoma, and then, you know, you burn it down and on and on. But in essence, we also have to look at movements in the world. When apartheid was dismantled, that just wasn't with South Africans, but that was an international and a global movement in the world. So we got to get back to aligning ourselves with movements in the world that are progressive, whether they're people who look like us or whether they're comrades. And I'm going to go beyond allies, comrades who are prepared, who also share a common interest in a vision with us. And in terms of critical race theory, one of the things too sometimes that we can be bad about is the messaging. What is it? Keep the messaging simple. Don't make it complicated so that people understand what these terms and concepts are, and that they're not terms and concepts that only are located in academia, because sometimes that doesn't ripple through down to the masses. So we got to get ahead of the discourse, and we got to keep the messaging simple. And I want to be now bold and dare. And so, and a lot of this question I'm also seeing too is triggered by what is happening across the border. And I think that this is an incredible moment in history where we could probably say to our brothers and sisters and they in America, you know what, why don't you invite us to monitor your elections? Because if this was happening some other place in the world, you know, the US would say we need to go and oversee elections to make sure that the transition. So here's an incredible moment for people of African descent all around the world, people like who work out of whatever those institutions and think tanks are, to say to the African Americans like Stephanie Abrams, you know, we want to come and we can be scrutineers of your election. This is a time for Canadians to take bold leadership and to remember the great global movements that we've had over the years as we fought against apartheid and so many other conditions around the world. And then to Emmanuel's point and to Anthony's point, we have to drill down on the policy and the policies that are put out by government, and how do we change the language of those policies and the tone of those policies that they represent us. So I'm calling on, so my response to that question is that we have to look at international leadership, and we have to shift our focus of looking at only North America or the US for examples of leadership. That has not worked for us. There has been exceptions to the rule, Marcus, Brother Malcolm, et cetera, et cetera. But we have to look at the Caribbean region. Today on the news, the University of the West Indies presented their list of the folks who are going to be given honorary doctorates. I heard that in the car. But what caught my attention and what I thought about, here is an institution that has produced some of the most brilliant minds in the world. And they are bold enough now to carry the mantle and to be drum majors on the question of reparation. So we got to shift focus. We got to shift focus from Europe. We got to shift focus from across the border, but we got to look inside. And we also have to look at the Caribbean region, in Latin America, and some of the emerging movements of people. And we have to align with them in order to get ahead of what Maurice Beckford is asking. And I think that we should be really sexy and bold to say we would love to come as scrutineers to oversee an election so that we can say to the world, this indeed has been fair. This indeed has been favorable to people of African descent. So bring it on, everybody. Bring it on. This is a time of a rejuvenation of movements, not only to speak to race, but also to speak the class that is also among us, and also to speak to the issues of gender and sexuality that are also among us, and keep the messaging dead simple. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Itah. As
I'm looking
usual,
forward,
always delivering.
I'm looking
This
forward.
day, yes, this day is a special day for us as people of African descent. This is our collective day.
Yeah.
This is not Jamaica Day. This is
Right.
not Trinidad Day. This is not Ghana Day. This is Africa Day. This is our day. And I hope in the future we make this day a day to remember and celebrate. Thank you all for being so generous. And this is so important that we could celebrate Mama Africa.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And the one last quote that I love that I saw at the Marley's exhibition, and I thought, oh, brilliant every time. Brilliant every time. Some people are so poor, all they have is money. So enough respect, everybody. Enough respect. It has been an incredible opportunity to be here today. We have talked about uplifting our history, moving from temporary to permanence. We've talked about so many things. And also, too, I boldly will say that we've had the Halifax Declaration, but in 1937, the Honorable Marcus Mosiah Garvey, in his speech in Nova Scotia, which influenced the Honorable Robert Nesta Marley to write the Redemption Sound, was perhaps, in essence, the first national or Halifax Declaration. Enough respect, my people. Keep on keeping. Hey, aluta continua.
Minutes after they took I from the bottomless pit, but my hand was made strong by the hand of the Almighty. We forward in this generation triumphantly. Won't you help to sing these songs of freedom? 'Cause all I ever have, redemption songs, redemption songs. Emancipate yourselves from mental slavery. None but ourselves can free our minds. Have no fear for atomic energy, 'cause none of them can stop the time. How long shall they kill our prophets while we stand aside and look? Ooh, some say it's just a part of it. We've got to fulfill the book. Won't you help to sing these songs of freedom? 'Cause all I ever have, redemption songs, redemption songs, redemption songs. Emancipate yourselves from mental slavery. None but ourselves can free our mind. Oh, have no fear for atomic energy, 'cause none of them can stop at the time. How long shall they kill our prophets while we stand aside and look? Yes, some say it's just a part of it. We've got to fulfill the book. Won't you help to sing these songs of freedom? 'Cause all I ever have, redemption songs. All I ever have, songs, these songs of freedom, songs of freedom.